Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Public Cloud Design Tips and Tricks. In this channel, we generally discuss about public cloud design problem statements and their related solution. Today, we are going to discuss about Azure SQL Business Continuity. What is the problem statement? How to realize Azure SQL Business Continuity. Now, before that, let's try to understand what is business continuity. Business continuity is a terminology based on the business level readiness to maintain a critical application and services in case of an emergency or disruptions. That means how you can move your application back or your services back to work position when there is an emergency or in case of any disruption in the hardware or in the system. So let's try to understand few terminologies. What is region, availability zone and data center? When you provision a service, that means the service is getting created inside a data center in the form of an hardware. And that time, by combining multiple data center together, you will find availability zones. By combining multiple availability zone inside a region, that creates a region. So multiple data center create availability zones, multiple availability zones create a region. Now let's try to understand. So when you have created a Azure SQL database, that time this database has been created in this data center. Okay, and due to some power outage or some network failure, that hardware is getting failed. That means your SQL database is not working anymore or got corrupted. In that case, what will happen to your application? How you can recover the data? How can you make your application back to the transaction? In that case, you need to have a proper business continuity plan to handle this type of scenario. Let's try to understand different types of disruption scenarios. The first type is local hardware or software failure, which we talked about it. That means due to a power outage or network failure, there is a local hardware or software failure. In that case, how to handle that? If there is a data corruption or deletion by any human error, that means the user or the admin who is interacting with the database, by human error he has deleted some table or some row or some database. Third one is data center outage or region failure. That means due to flood or earthquake, due to some natural calamity, your data center or the region is totally out of control. In that case, how we can get back your application? And also error during maintenance window. That means as you most of the cases you are using IaaS, PaaS or SaaS solutions. Most of the cases with IaaS and PaaS, you will have to do a maintenance window to upgrade your software or to maintain your software or to catch your hardware. So this type of activities has to be done by mostly the public cloud vendor or by the developer or the infra person who is working on it. But during that time, if something goes wrong, then how can you get back your data or get back your application up and running? So these are all different various disruption scenarios which needs to be taken care by Azure SQL PaaS database. Now we'll cover few of them clearly. So let's try to understand the first one, local hardware or software failure with Azure SQL. So there are two solutions which Microsoft Azure provide. If you want to avoid only this part, that means you do not care about the regional failure rather than availability zone failure, you are just only care about how the local hardware failure can be handled properly, then there is a base feature which is been provided by Microsoft Azure SQL is local redundant availability. If you enable this feature with your Azure SQL PaaS, that means it will copy the data to local redundant storage within the same data center in case of small scale network or power outage. You can get back your data. Second, zone redundant availability. That means if you want to take care of if there is a availability zone outage, that means multiple data centers are getting affected in the availability zone, then you can enable the zone redundant availabilities. It will help you to copy the data across availability zone. That means if one availability zone is getting down, then the other availability zone will help you out. That is what about zone redundant availability. Then second, how to protect business from data loss. That means from the human error. So the most important feature which has been provided by Azure SQL is PaaS SQL is a backup. So there are three types of backups that Azure PaaS SQL provides. One is automated weekly backup. Second is differential backups in every 12 to 24 hours. Third is transactional log backups in every 5 to 10 minutes. So based on your NFRs, based on your use case, you can decide which type of backups that you can tell. And once you are enable the backup features, then after the backups, you can get back your data from that particular point of time or particular time where the backup has been taken. So based on your need, you can decide that. Next, how to handle unplanned scenario in case of any regional failure. That means if a region is completely getting failed and you are having a CI critical application and you want to handle it efficiently so that your data loss will not be happening. In that case, there are two beautiful solutions which has been provided by Microsoft Azure is active geo-replication and auto-failover groups. I am going to cover in brief about these two features, but again we will have a clear video to deep dive into these features and also their comparison. The first one is active geo-replication. That means you can think about this scenario. This diagram I have taken it from Microsoft document, and you can think about this scenario. There is a primary region and there will be a secondary region. That means you are going to create an application. In this case, you are having an ingress load balancer. You are having an application which is doing some operation over this database known as primary logical server, where in this server you will create a database and you are doing some read and write operation. When you enable active geo-replication, that means your data from this database can sync. Geo-replication can be done to a secondary region where the database is getting created. So here the concept is primary and secondary can be in the same region or in the different region. So it is all up to you that you want to keep the primary and secondary in the same region or in the other region. So if you are keeping it in the other region, then also the synchronization of data is quite synchronized. It is not asynchronous. That means every transaction will synchronize synchronously sync with the secondary logical server. Also, the secondary logical server, we call it as geo-replica or geosecondary. And the geo-replication initiated either programmatically or manually. Please focus on this point. The geo-replication will be initiated either programmatically or manually by the user. That means the connection and endpoints will change. That means when you are switching, in this case, you can think about this scenario. So the flow is coming and your application is running here, and your primary connection has been established from your application to this primary logical server. Due to some reason, this logical server is down and you want to switch back to the secondary. Then in that case, programmatically you have to do it, or manually you have to sync it to the new database, that is your secondary logical server. That is about active geo-replication. Also, you can have multiple secondary logical server or logical replica or geo-replica for a single primary if you are using active geo-replication. So you can have multiple regions where you have multiple geo-replicas, secondary replicas, which will be linked to the primary. Now, in the second scenario, which is active geo-replication, which is auto-failover group, when you are creating an auto-failover group, that means you can initiate a geo-failover manually, or you can also delegate it by the Azure service based on the user-defined policy. That means you can have one replica or one secondary server for your one primary server. There cannot be more than one geo-secondary for a one primary server. And also the failover will be automatically switched from your application. That means you do not have to do any changes in your application side or modify any changes in case of any failover happens. So that is the power of auto-failover group. But if you see the basic differences, you can have only one secondary replica in case of auto-failover group, and you can have multiple secondary replicas in case of active geo-replication, and both are synchronous. So this is all about auto-failover group and active geo-replication. I got this data by following this link. I would highly recommend all of you to go through the Microsoft documents. They have really explained really well. In our next video, we'll try to deep dive into all these features in detail. Thanks a lot for watching the video.